Hi, and welcome to the Titan Robotics 2020 Virtual LEGO Mindstorm Summer Camp. My name is Virginia, and I'll be working with you this week to explore LEGO Mindstorms through the programming website Scratch. Before we jump into the actual content, I'm going to go over how this camp will work. Every day, I will be posting a new video that will help you work through different concepts on Scratch relating to LEGO Mindstorms. There is no live component to this camp, but if you are struggling or have a question, please email Titan Robotics at frc5587@gmail.com. I love responding to emails, and I'm happy to organize a Zoom conference to go over your question if you would like us to. To begin with, what are LEGO Mindstorms? Mindstorms are a product made by LEGO to introduce robotics using LEGOs. You make a body for your robot and attachments out of different LEGO pieces, and the brain of the robot is powered by batteries and can be programmed. Mindstorms are coded to work autonomously, which means that they aren't controlled in real time. You program a Mindstorm to follow steps, and it executes these steps in order. Mindstorms are used in some robotics competitions to complete tasks for points. In real life, a lot of the difficulties of Mindstorms have to do with their imprecision. It can be really hard to get the robot to do what you want, exactly as you want it, every time. Online, that isn't the case. On Scratch, our robot will perform the same every time unless we change the code. That means we can explore more in-depth ideas and spend more time on the fun parts of Scratch, since we don't have to spend so much time working on the physical details. For this camp, you will need a Scratch account. For this, follow the instructions on the Scratch website, scratch.mit.edu. You may need your parent or guardian's email address as well. Having an account will allow you to save your work, so it is highly recommended. Before we begin, I'd recommend running through the tutorial offered on Scratch, but I'll provide my own rundown of what you need to know. This is a project you'll be working with for our camp. In Scratch, you can create a remix of this project, which will allow you to make alterations while keeping a connection to the main project. This will also help me see your project if you have any questions. So let's go inside. So on the right side here, we can see the stage. The stage is where the different sprites or things move around, and the stage has a series of backdrops that you can change to change the setting of your project. The stage is where people interact with the project at large, especially if you're publishing it for other people to look at. They're not going to be really seeing back here unless they want to, so it's a good idea to make sure that if you're doing anything that requires user interaction, that it's possible to do that through the stage. Underneath the stage, we can see the different sprites that we'll be using. Right now we only have one sprite, but we're going to go into making multiple ones later on. And again, we can see where the backdrops are. You can also see here different information about the sprite we currently have selected, like its size, its direction or where it's pointing, and its X and Y coordinates on the Cartesian plane that Scratch uses. We'll go into more information about all of this later. On the left side, we can see the code palette, which has a bunch of different blocks that you can use. You drag the blocks out from the code palette, and initially you can just click them to use it. If you're done with a block, you can drag it back in to delete it, but be careful, because if you have more than one block, dragging one block will drag all the blocks underneath it too. Let's move our robot around the field. There are several ways to move a sprite around the stage. First, we can simply move the robot around. That's not very technical, however, and it won't allow our robot to move without us, so it really isn't applicable to our Mindstorm robots. Steps are another way to move the robot. One step moves the robot one increment forward. So when I click this, you can see that our robot moves forward. Steps will move the robot forward in the direction that it's pointing. If I change the direction of my robot, let's put it maybe at a 90-degree angle. The robot will now move in this direction because it is pointing in a new direction. X and Y coordinates, on the other hand, move the robot regardless of what direction it is pointing in. So I can have my robot go to direct coordinates. And this is just like how it is in math, where a low x coordinate means it's all the way on the left, a high x coordinate means it's all the way on the right, a high y coordinate means it's all the way up, and a low y coordinate means it's all the way down, with 0, 0 being in the exact center of the stage. So we can change the x and y coordinates by giving our robot a new coordinate to go to, or we can alter the coordinates directly by changing the values. If we notice, when we change y by 10, the robot moves up, and it will always move up regardless of what direction we have it pointing in. You can see when I rotate the robot 90 degrees, it still moves up when I change the y by 10. You can change the angle of your robot directly by giving it a direction to point in, or by having it turn. When you put two pieces of code together, the program will run the code in order. So when I click this, it moves the robot 10 steps forward, and then it turns it 15 degrees. And it will do that for every time I click it. So we talked about earlier how when most users are running the program, they're not actually going to be going back here into where all your scripts are. So that's why it's important to use event blocks to allow users to start the program without having to come back here. When we use the when green flag clicked block, the user can start the program just by clicking the green flag. See, now when I click it, you can see the computer running this code. Notice how it's not running any of the other code that isn't attached to this block. And again, when I'm done with this code, I can just drag it back into the palette to delete it. Right now, you're going to create your own project based off of my template if you haven't already. You're going to go to the link in the description of this video to find this project and remix it with your new Scratch account. Your first task is to move your robot around the field using any of the ways we talked about here in the motion category. Pause the video until you're done with this, and feel free to rewind and watch my segment about the different ways to move your robot around the field again if you want some further help. Alright, have you finished moving your robot around the field? Which method did you use? Here we can see two different examples of how you can move your robot around the field. I'm going to go ahead and run each of them. So first we're running this one, and now we're running this one. If you notice, it looks the exact same, even though the blocks are different. That's a common theme in Scratch, where you can have blocks that look very different, but they ultimately do the same thing. So the next thing that we're going to focus on today is customization. In real life, you can create unique Lego structures to make your robot your own. In Scratch, we can also change the appearance of our robot and its surroundings. We can either change the costumes themselves, or we can run code to alter the appearance of costumes. Costumes can be seen by clicking the Costumes tab in the upper left corner. Make sure you're on your sprite though, otherwise you won't be able to see them. So you can have as many costumes as you want, and they're all listed here in this left-hand column. And you can put them in any order that you would like. So obviously we can change the appearance of our sprite by directly changing the costume that it's on, or by changing what the costume itself looks like. We can do the same thing to the backdrop. So up here, instead of costumes, it's going to say backdrops when you're on your backdrop menu. So you can draw or import as many as you'd like, and you can rotate through them. So as you can see here, I can simply drag to change the order that my backdrops are in. Costumes and backdrops are also very similar in how you get new ones. You can directly import them from Scratch's library using the magnifying glass or just by clicking the initial button, or you can make your own using the paint icon. You can also surprise yourself from one from their collection, upload something from your computer, or take a picture. If you're making your own costume, let's take a look at the options that you have. You can make your costume in vector, which is going to be large, smooth shapes, or in bitmap, which will make them pixelated. Be careful though, because once you go into bitmap, any of the shapes you have will become pixelated and you can't really undo that. Unless, of course, you click the undo button up here. You can make shapes in either of the modes with a fill color and an outline. You can make lines, use text, or just paint with the paintbrush. You can change the color for all of this by altering the color, saturation, or how intense the color is, or brightness, how dark the color is. You can also use the eyedropper tool to make the colors match on your project by picking up the color that has already been used. If we look at the looks category in our code palette, we can also see that it's possible to program the robot to change its appearance. We can have the sprite change background, change costumes, or rotate through them, and we can have the sprite change the backdrop. So if we click next backdrop here, we'll see that our backdrop changes. We can also change the size of our sprite and do all these cool effects to it, like color, fisheye, whirl, pixelate, mosaic, brightness, and ghost. Finally, we can also get our sprite to say or think something using the bubbles. For your next task, customize your robot or program. Try to do at least one thing behind the scenes, so directly altering or making a new backdrop or costume, and program one element into your code. Pause this video now to work on that. Okay, so let's look at how I customized my robot. I gave mine some pretty new colors inspired by Titan Robotics, and in my code, I decided I wanted my robot to pixelate when it moved. Let's see what that looks like. Oh, that's pretty cool. Notice how it goes back to normal once I press the stop sign button. What did you pick for your project? Make sure to save and share your project once you're done, and I'll be taking a look at any remixes on my project to give you feedback. As always, if you have a direct question, please email me at frc5587@gmail.com. See you guys tomorrow.